Welcome to Agency Acquisitions and Exits. I'm your host, Peter Lang. Today, I have the absolute pleasure of speaking with Ian Millner, a visionary entrepreneur who transformed Iris from an agency built on the cornerstone of a single client relationship into a global creative powerhouse. He didn't just grow organically by creating great value and innovation in the marketplace. He strategically scaled through M&A. He shares that it wasn't all organized chaos with a proven track record. It was spending time with talent and the creative and strategic process of unifying two business opportunities. Now, I want you to go into this understanding that your next big move, like Ian's, is going to require a significant amount of time and energy, and it's worth it. Let's dive in. Ian, thank you for joining me.
It's a real pleasure.
For the listener who doesn't know who you are, can you at least get us up to speed to agency life, and then take us to how your journey began with that big client?
Sure. Yeah, so my name is Ian Millner. I am one of the co-founders of a company called Iris. I spent 25 years as CEO of said company, and over that period of time, I grew it to more than 1,000 people, more than $100 million worth of revenue, resulting in sale 10 years ago to our biggest client, Samsung. I'm still actively engaged in the business as chair, and it all began over a couple of beers in a pub in London, like you do. And we were all pretty close to a company called Ericsson. And at that point in time, Apple weren't making phones. So they had something like 25% market share. And also at that point in time, digital wasn't really that much of a thing. So if you were sort of young and into digital and somewhat of a native in and around the sort of passion points, such as film, music, sport, we were able to build a business around those passion points and become very much a kind of youth specialist business in technology. And at that point in time, Ericsson found that to be a compelling proposition and certainly something that they weren't able to get from any of the big networks that they were working with at the time. So that was very much the sort of genesis of Iris and the start of our incredible journey.
Many agencies start with a similar story because
Mm.
they didn't just find you on the streets of London. You were in an agency, and that agency wasn't able to provide or wasn't expanding into the areas that you thought you could create value. And that conversation with a few beers turned into, well, maybe if we went out on our own, we could do this. How big of a step, because this is common for a lot of team members within agencies, was it to go out on your own and engage with this client as kind of like entrepreneurs, but with servicing one major account?
I feel like you're putting words in my mouth, Peter. But yeah, I mean, yeah, that is it. It's I think what happens when one is engaged in their sort of professional life, there are moments where things are frustrating, and a lot of that frustration is often driven by the nature of the place you're working and the limitations. I think we were all in an agency where there was a lot of M&A going on, and the agency was being acquired, and that basically meant the whole sort of business ground to a halt, and we were sort of left sort of somewhat unsupervised, being unable to sort of really do much. And I think that clients are ambitious. Clients they want brilliant ideas. They want brilliant people. That's true all the time. That's true even today in this sort of AI fueled sort of doom loop that we're all in at the moment. And clients can also be provocative as well around their frustrations in order to get more of or less of what they and that's sort of how it went, really. It was very much a collaboration. Our business is very much a relationships business. It's very much a trust business, beyond just talent and hard work and all the rest of it. And you sort of find yourself in a situation where one thing leads to another, and you spot an opportunity and you take it. That's what happened with us, really. It was like we got to know a client that was becoming more and more frustrated. We put a proposal to that client. The client said, "Yeah, right, then we'll give it a project, see how it goes," and that's all you need. And we were obviously 27, 28 years old. If it failed, what have we lost, really? And kind of done the presentation, we literally were up and running, and we put the team together. Ericsson fulfilled their obligations and gave us a project or two. They were very generous and supportive. And it worked really well because we were different. We were young, we were cheap, we were extremely creative and innovative. We were playing with different sort of forms of media, some digital, some not, some mobile, and that sort of experimentation was a product, if you like, that they found really exciting and was differentiating for us, and that then became the sort of basis of our agency for the first few years, and we very much used that as a sort of way of defining a youth-centric, technology-enabled business, agency business. And at that point in time, there weren't really very many of those knocking around, so it meant that we grew really quickly, and we were very attractive to other clients as well.
Unpack that a bit because you have, we'll use buyer language. You had significant client concentration. You were all in and launching with a new client. How did the process of adding new clients evolve in the early days? Of course, you're the only ones who are young, innovative, disruptive with technology, and working on a big account, proving stuff in the marketplace. So people say, do for them what we for us. But again, like, you're all in on a single account. How did you isolate roles, responsibilities, say it's your job to go find the next Sony Ericsson? Is there another Sony Ericsson? What are those early conversations about expanding the business look like?
Yeah, we were deliberate in that we knew that life had to be more than just Sony Ericsson, because one day it will change. And sure enough, it did and has done. So right from the get-go, we were purposeful in terms of using what was special about that relationship to reach out and appeal to other types of business that want that strange sort of cocktail of youth and ignorance and brilliance. And we had two CEOs at the start, myself and Stuart Shanley. Stuart was very focused on Sony Ericsson and building that relationship out, and I was very focused on finding other clients. And that partnership was perfect, because
Yep.
not only did the Sony Ericsson relationship flourish and grow and take us into lots more markets, it allowed us to at the same time attract clients all the time to roughly the same sort of idea, the same sort of principles and skills. So it meant that we had growth, security, stability, cash generation and scaling off our founding client. At the same time, we were able to sort of be experimental, pitch for things, invest in new skills that were going to take us into new areas. And also over a 12-month period, we were probably acquiring another client a month. And some of those were meaningful, sizable clients, such as the UK government, or working globally for Shell or American Express or Discovery Channel or whatever. So we had a really good run for the first few years using this model. It was really successful. I think the idea of a sort of partnership like that. I've looked back on it, and I think I underestimated how powerful that can be if there is
Yeah.
such clarity of scope and a high performance attitude and a strong investment in the partnership. So there's got to be conditions that make a relationship like that work and meaningful.
Quite fortunate. Yeah.
But I regret that I didn't appreciate it more. In fact, because that was such an important part of the sort of the coding of the culture that allowed us then to scale across so many markets.
When did M&A become a positive thing for you? Because you were kind of born from the consequences of M&A.
Yes.
And then when you're on the other side of the table, it becomes a sensible way to grow. So when
Yeah, that's very well put. Yeah, so the consequences piece is just worth just touching on, I think, first, and that's to do with complacency, or more specifically, anti-complacency, and being aware that it's about people, and it's about people feeling engaged and empowered and part of it. So we worked really hard to make our business everyone's business, literally. And we had a lot of shareholders at lots of different levels. We had a culture that was very open and very much about rewarding people having a go at things, entrepreneurially, culturally, and creatively. So there's a lot of trial, a lot of innovation, It made it really positive and enjoyable. It made it work hard as well, but it was also a highly ambitious, play hard place as well, and that was so important. In terms of growth, it was also important when there were tougher times as well. It allowed you to weather the storms. So it was, without really knowing it at an academic level, it was an important part of the whole process, the whole journey.
I presume it also made you more receptive to change. Like it sounds like a
Well,
culture that's progressive, not stagnant, not constrained in a certain mindset. And when you started doing M&A, you're like, we always test. This is a test. We're trying to break things and see if we get better. Would that be the case, or was it different?
yeah, no, that's a brilliant observation, and I would say that if I was to still distill down what has been most important about Iris over 25 years, its ability to appetite for change. Everything's always changing. So that's a really important skill set out, and a set of attitudes, I think, that has really stood us in good stead over the years. Like all the way from the beginning in the sort of growth, global economic crises, COVID, whatever it is, interest in the ability to knowing when to change, having no hang-ups, issues, sense of legacy or baggage. That's always been a really important thing about our culture, I think. But when I start to think about adding in M&A to what was essentially an organic journey. I think again, it's just one of those things that is experimental. It becomes a discussion, starts to feel like it's a good idea, and you end up doing one. And the rationale was we met some people that were in management consulting, and they were also into a data and CRM. They were working with gambling companies, and they were working in sport. And we just got on really well. And we knew that it was a high impact area, that there's high influence over clients. We knew that we would be able to help them scale across our network and leverage the places and spaces in the world where we were. They were like 5, 6 people. So they had a high concentration of expertise. It was really high margin, and they were extremely influential over clients, but they weren't able to scale it. So we could see that that was an opportunity, and we could see that we wouldn't be able to just, go and build that ourselves. So we got into a discussion. I think they were talking to M&C Saatchi at the time. M&C Saatchi offered them more, but they chose us because they could see that we were a partner and we were in it for the long term, and we would back them, and then they could see that we would enable them to then scale their business across our business. At that point in time, we were a global company, so it was
How
incredibly
many
successful.
how many people? So give us kind of the trappings.
Um, Yeah, it's hard to say because that was probably halfway in, but I can't remember exactly, but I do know that we must have been, 8 or 9 offices around the world, and this consulting business it was called Concise when we acquired it. We took them from London. We opened in Atlanta to service Intercontinental Hotel. We opened in Shanghai. We went in Singapore. We were in Sydney. So it was really successful, and each of these businesses had a life of their own, and they had clients that they were generating locally, and also they were connected to allow us to scale some of the bigger clients that we were already working on as a network.
I mean, and it was, within a margin of safety, rather a small acquisition relative to the size of Iris at the time. So would fair to say low risk in many respects.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was really low risk, but because it's the first one, it doesn't feel like that. So it felt really odd, and it required us to sort of have a bit of a word with ourselves, really, because it dragged on a little bit. And as you'll know, the best M&As have a real momentum to them. They're not sort of stodgy, or they don't get stuck. They keep moving, because you want both parties to be motivated and look for solutions to the inevitable challenges that are baked into a process. But it did feel stressful because we hadn't done it before. We didn't know what we didn't know. But I think because it went so well, that really did sort of whet our appetite. And also, again, without really knowing it, codifying it, having a process or anything like that, we had some sort of principles that made sure that when we did it again, it was more likely to be successful than not.
Do you remember those principles?
Well, more or less, yeah. I mean, we certainly didn't have a set way of doing it. So we didn't go in with this is our way, this is the toolbox, this is the structure, this is how we price and value. And We didn't have that at all. We had a sense, and we also didn't have a sort of attitude towards integration that meant that day one you'd be this, or you'd move to this office, or you'd have to migrate onto this system. It wasn't like that at all. It was very much about working with the teams, the leadership teams, understanding what was valuable, people, clients, IP, whatever, taking our time to get to know these businesses, recognizing that they're taking a punt on us as much as we're taking a punt on them, and making sure we are value add partners to them, because they've obviously had to lead their business, their clients, their people into this relationship also. Because what we want to happen is everybody gets on well, we've worked together positively, and everyone sticks around because they want to. So we sort of took that approach to it, much more of a sort of cultural and relationships approach to it, rather than seeing it as a transaction.
Which actually gives you an edge. A lot of the market, at least from a professional M&A perspective, is transactional in nature. And there's a speed to making an offer, there's a formula in place, there's an integration plan. So it must have been a welcome response. These guys are approaching us in a flexible way, collaborative, reflection of their culture. I want to be there with them.
Yeah.
And then you could kind of point to the manufactured and contrived process of other prospective buyers and say, see how that's a lot of friction there. That's boxes you're going to be fitting into. Those are P&Ls and technology stacks that aren't aligned with your age. There's probably a lot of things that gave you an advantage in making a deal. Given us, you're about halfway into the journey, you get this smaller acquisition under your belt, figured out it could potentially be positive for you. When did you start turning up the dial?
Yeah. So it was a good year or two afterwards, and it was when we started to be much more purposeful about the destiny of the company, and we started to
Define that for us, just so we can get in your head a bit.
Yeah. So usually with agency style businesses, people aren't so clear about where they're going, how much they want it to be worth, when. And we spent the first sort of half of our journey being very culture centric, being very much sort of into ourselves and just having fun.
It will never end. The party will never end.
So although we had principles, we didn't really have an actual plan. So at some point, any journey, there has to be a sense of, yes, but where is this going? Because in our particular case, I found myself leading a group of shareholders, like let's say 50 shareholders, and there are a lot of mortgages riding on that, and people do want to know, yeah, but when will I see some money for this? And our business, because it was so relationship centric, we had a lot of people who've been here for a long time. So, you do have to take that responsibility seriously. Kind of once we kind of got through the sort of midlife crisis, really, where we had to sort of grow up, we had to start running much more of a professional global business and take it more seriously. We then started to think, well, where is this going? How big do we want to be, and roughly when? And that's at that point we started to chart M&A as much more of a deliberate, considered part of our growth strategy. Obviously, it means that by definition, you're starting to target certain markets that you need to be in for some sort of advantage, or to support certain clients or certain skill sets, whether that's B2B or data or pricing strategy, whatever it is. So that is at that point we started to be much more considered and strategic around what we were doing and why and when and what order, how's it going to be funded, and how's it going to create value for the business.
So you began this process of being acquisitive.
Mm-hmm.
Deliberately. Did you use all sources to find people, your networks, the competitors, brokers? What did you tap into to start this deliberate intention?
Yeah. So literally that's it. We used all of those sources, and there were times when we hired an advisor to go to a certain market to find us a certain thing. So, for example, we bought a business in Sao Paulo, and we worked with an advisor to help us identify potential partners and then execute the deal. In addition to that, I mean, sort of because of that, really, one of the sort of consequences of that is you then get approached by people with opportunities. So we got approached by advisors who happened to have businesses that they were, looking for a partner And so, in some cases, some of those were premium businesses that were like ready to rumble. They'd been like working on their exit plan for a while. And in some cases, they were not. They were like distress, or and they'd lost their way a little, or there was an issue with the management team, or whatever, or an issue with the client, or some issue that needed to be resolved. And we became really good at having a good imagination, so good at being able to see the opportunity. So we bought a pricing strategy business in North America, and that was somebody came to us with the idea. We thought about it. We thought, hang on a minute, pricing strategy. That's really interesting. That's really high value. It's really impactful. It's really high margin. It's really differentiating. Yeah, I mean, so we ended up buying that business and then integrating it over a period of time. But also imagination, as in there was a business. They had offices in Munich, Chicago, and Singapore. It was a corporate partner that wanted to divest that business. It wasn't profitable. There were quite a few issues, and we ended up buying it for nearly nothing, and it was an incredibly good deal. We engaged fully. We worked closely with the management teams. We worked out what was really valuable and important about the business. And we turned it into something, really valuable over a long period of time, because we were able to sort of leverage their skills and their clients and take them into new markets and all the rest of it. So I think it's one of those things where providing you know what you're doing, providing you've got a creative mind for opportunity, providing you can you're not frightened by the things that put off a lot of buyers. But you're able to sort of see where there are opportunities and back yourselves to then turn those opportunities into something meaningful. I think it can be a really good thing, but I think it's quite an unusual way of doing it. From what I can see now, I think people are much more risk averse. It's much more like the transactional sort of model. I think today.
How did you organize your internal leadership resources to start prioritizing M&A? So a lot of businesses that are maybe do one deal, kind of get a taste for it, they're borrowing departments and team members who are client facing or operational to get the first few done. And then when it becomes a real deliberate effort, you built an acquisition team, someone internally. You're using outside partners potentially. How did that working M&A initiative get started, and who'd you put on that A team?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to manage it carefully, because people get really excited and carried away, and actually it becomes really counterproductive. So it's a really small team. So it'd be me, CFO, one or two other people, and then we would obviously, over the course of the process, pull in different people at the right moment, depending on where we were at. But yeah, it was a careful, conscious decision around resource management, so that we weren't spinning our wheels and getting all overexcited all of the time, because there's lots of day jobs to do as well and running in parallel.
How'd you get buy-in? What did that look like? So you are the sponsor, you bring in the CFO to help validate and kind of test the assumptions around the opportunity. How did the decision-making process get, distributed across the organization so they got excited, not like, look at what Ian brought?
Well, yeah, it was nearly never a look who Ian's just met sort of thing. It's a careful process where you're socializing an idea, you're collecting observations and feedback, you're introducing key executives to the relationship to see what they think, and then you're getting to a point where you're constructing some sort of proposal around what do we think this relationship could be worth, which again you socialize carefully with key executives. So slowly but surely you're engaging the group of people around you in the process, so that you're never turning up to a meeting trying to sell it in. It's people have to feel like they're part of a team, particularly in a company like Iris, where it was all built by people. It's people powered. It's cultural. It's people have got skin in the game. It's their business too. So we were very careful to do that. And in fact, one of the best deals we did was we were looking at search and performance marketing, and one of the partners said, "Oh, I've got this friend who's got one of those." I said, "Oh, well, why don't you just ask him if he's up for a conversation about acquisition?" Which he then did, and then it became a great deal. Yeah, it's these things obviously can be more formal or less formal, but I think it's about recognizing that there's no one single way of doing it.
Irish was growing so quickly. I'm very confident in saying you probably were getting knocks on your door from interested buyers while you were out there being acquisitive and buying. How did you traverse those opportunities? And what was your mindset about what the exit could potentially or partner in the future could look like?
Yeah. I think we were getting knocks, but it's over like such a long period of time because, fairly old company now. I remember in the early days, I think it was probably Omnicom who was the first one to knock. Obviously I don't even recall being flattered. I just will go along with this because it's learning.
You're like, okay.
And I just knew the timing wasn't right, and we weren't. It's not that we weren't ready. It's just that we weren't finished. It's sort of different, but it was a really good learning process. And every time somebody came, we always would take the meeting, have a discussion. And I think even if we felt most likely it isn't going to go anywhere, we always saw it as a really important way of building relationships and also learning for the occasion when we were ready. So it was really useful to do that.
How much education did you take them on for that ride? If Omnicom or one of these big networks or a buyer shows up, how far did you really entertain it? So if going to someone who's running their business today, outreach is aplenty, one conversation, two conversations, sharing numbers, like how far is entertaining these but not being finished?
Yeah, it's quite hard to say, but I think it's obviously agency businesses. Whilst there can be a plan and a big journey, a big caper, things happen year on year, don't they? Clients loss or something happens, you've got to close an office or whatever it is. It can be a bit like a game of snakes and ladders. So you never know really where an agency is at, sort of attitudinally. So given that it's about being in the right place at the right time and having the right sort of relationships and being thought of in the right way, I think. So I think when I think about big new business pictures, they can often take a year and a half from start to finish. So I think about like if we want to win a car account or something from today, we'll go and meet loads of people, have lots of conversations, a few meetings, this and that, and from start to finish, it's a year and a half. I use a year and a half as the sort of way of thinking about it because I think that's what agencies can imagine because it's not business as usual but it's somewhat strategic, but it's not so long into the future that you can't imagine it anymore. You know what I mean? But so,
It's not an
that's how.
impossible journey.
So yeah, so I would work off a year and a half, and I don't know why. I've got no science,
Just
got no
feels right.
science.
That's what matters. It just I mean, doing how many total transactions did Iris do before you did your transaction?
Yeah, so let's have a think. Four before and probably four after. That's probably about right. Give or take one or two. I'm not sure exactly, but that'll be about right.
And by the third or fourth prior to your exit opportunity, did you feel like the M&A side was, a positive contribution to not just, increasing inorganic revenue, but also the capabilities, the resources, and you felt like you could just do more and more of it?
Yeah, it really is, and I really wish we'd got into the habit earlier. Um, and I also wish we'd invested more in the US earlier using M&A. So
Well, let's touch on
what
that,
one
Ian, because
what,
that's a very common disposition towards M&A, which is I wish I started earlier.
mm,
What would have happened or what would have been different if you had?
I think we'd have got bigger sooner. That scale scale is just useful, isn't it? It's valuable. It allows you to win more stuff. It changes the whole journey, the trajectory of the journey, doesn't it? So, I think about how much effort goes into an organic build or an organic startup or an acqui-hire or something like that you're doing. And you sort of think, well, that's our normal way. It's risk-free. And it's like it's not really, not really. It'll take a while, and they're hit and miss. So it doesn't take much to derail a startup that you built in your network. So I think if you've got a proper strategy, likely America's in it. So if it is, then go early and really seriously think about M&A as a sort of key part of getting into the market, and because it will multiply everything that you have already, but it will bring proper US talent, proper US network and clients and lots of other of other things as well that will become useful later.
How much time did you spend on it? A common objection to the growing business is time allocation to M&A and these kind of discussions that may or may not go anywhere within that year and a half of expectation of investment into the opportunity. So thinking back, was it 20% of your time, maybe 10%? If you could
Yeah,
segment it, well, what do you think it looked like?
yeah. It's hard to say exactly, but I would say it was quite a lot. And it will have been bucketed all around, things to do with growth. But when we were in that period, it must have been like half the time or something. And this is very much a kind of byproduct of the earlier years. You remember when I was talking about there's very clear demarcation between me and Stuart. So I was able to be much more focused on business development and new business, and you roll that on a few more years, and that becomes M&A. So I think that's sort of what happened really, and that having that freedom to do that meant that we were able to sort of do it in our way.
Yeah. Maturity of a sales or an entrepreneur is corporate business development. At the end of the day, it's the same activity. You're contributing to
Yeah.
growth. You're just doing it in a more significant, potentially way, with higher stakes. Let's get to your conversation about Iris's next owner slash partner. You have all these shareholders and stakeholders that have supported you, mortgages tied to their futures, and you finally take one of those knocks on the door seriously. For those who don't know, who was that party and what did
Yeah.
that process look like?
Yeah, so we ended up doing a deal with our biggest client, Samsung. So yeah, we basically sold to Chael in Seoul. Chael I mean, they're part owned by Samsung. Samsung's their biggest client, and at that point in time, because of the journey we'd had on Sony Ericsson, Samsung had become a big part of us as well. So we were doing loads of work with them. So you see how these things sort of one thing leads to another. Yeah, and we got into this great conversation, obviously because of Omnicom and all those other meetings that we'd had earlier on in the journey. We knew what we wanted in a partner, and we also knew how to structure a deal and what type of opportunity it should be.
And what you didn't want in a partner.
And what we didn't want, and perhaps the biggest bit of this was relative size. So we didn't want someone so big that we would just disappear. We wanted somebody of a certain size that they'd have good levels of resources and reach and things that would be value add to our clients and our talent. But we wanted someone that we would be important to, and that would be supported, enabled, and allowed to sort of carry on being themselves. So it takes you to a certain type of business of a certain size and certain nature. So that's why when the opportunity came up, we knew that we felt confident that was what we should be doing.
You said
But
opportunity
also
comes up. Who initiated the tango?
yeah. So this is what's really interesting about the story. I think is well, I don't know who's interested. I find it interesting. The person who was the person who introduced Omnicom to us kept in touch with me, and over the years we did a few things together. He obviously had a successful career as an advisor, and it was actually him that brought the Shell opportunity to us. So it's a sort of interesting life goes full circle sort of moment. But that again, it's an interesting learning really about how networked and connected we all are. It is a small world, but in parallel at the time to make sure we were doing the right thing, we were also looking at private equity and other opportunities too in parallel. It was very clear that this was the right thing for us at that moment in time.
Important lesson, which a lot of what you covered has highlighted lessons learned and some sage advice. You knew potentially who was the right fit, but you still explored the exit alternatives available to you at that size so you could properly calibrate your interest, enthusiasm, and opportunity, create a bidding war, maximize value. What were some of the things that you got from looking at the market while evaluating the right fit?
Yeah. So it was less about leverage and price competitiveness. It was less about that. It was more about looking for partnerships, looking for value add relationships, looking for something that would be enduring, where we would be important. It would create continuity and a good place for our people and our clients. So it was more that, I think. So to get to the bottom of that, you have to experience different conversations.
You had an advantage. You were spending a significant portion of your time doing M&A. Did you just swap out the time for the sale process so it wasn't that disruptive, or do you remember that time being a little disruptive and distracting?
Yeah, it. I don't remember it being that disruptive or distracting, but I do remember it dragging on. So, and I did say earlier on, didn't I, that how important deal momentum was. I do recall it. It did take a while to get it over the line.
So from that Omnicom advisor intermediary introduction to deal done, how long was that then?
Yeah, um, uh, hard to say, but I think it must have been like a year, which I think looking back on it, it just feel I might be wrong. It might have been I might just be remembering it,
It's a year and a half.
reimagining. Yeah. If yeah, whatever the question, it's a year and a half.
It's a year and a half. So you're entertaining multiple opportunities, getting in front of prospective buyers. Did you have the unit economics figured out, like what percentage of the company, how you wanted to, transact? Did you have some expectations around that, or were you just kind of open to the offers?
We were open, but we were also able to sort of understand. So there was one thing that I forgot to mention over our journey. There has been several times where we've had an external partner become a shareholder. So when we were a startup business, we had an angel investor who put some cash in and had equity. We exited that person after the first 2 or 3 years, and they benefited really well as they should do from the investment. I think probably during the sort of middle bit of the journey, the bank actually became a shareholder as well. We won a competition, an entrepreneurs competition, where we basically pitched the sort of rollout of our network. And they then, we won this sort of prize with a load of equity and debt funding, which we then used to be more aggressive and roll out quicker. And so the bank was a shareholder for a while. We then exited the bank for a company called Meredith. Now, Meredith, you may well be familiar with Meredith. I think it's a fairly well-known US
Yep.
publisher media company. So they became a partner in Iris. At that point in time, content was emerging as a really interesting place. So we wanted to sort of really get closer to that space, and they wanted to get closer to the more of an agency sort of style space as well. That was more bespoke and more influential over clients because they were very much a media business. And so they were a shareholder for a while. We exited Meredith at the point at which we did the deal with Chael. So there was a journey that is worth me just sort of filling in the gaps of
It's also a great perspective because you called yourselves like almost co-CEOs. The role that a CEO traditionally plays in corporate is an external stakeholder CEO. So shareholders,
yeah.
capital, M&A. And a lot of entrepreneurs, because we have to label people CEO, obviously, are CEOs who are focused on internal operations instead of external. And so it sounds like you already had such great experience being an external stakeholder type founder and CEO that, again, you were prepared for these types of opportunities.
I think that's right. I mean, without knowing it, yes, that's. I think that's right.
Hindsight. If if you could go back in time and kind of prepare yourself for the journey, other than starting M&A earlier, what are some of the things that you did really well that you maybe didn't even know you did well, but you look back and go, oh, he did that really well, so I would recommend it to others? And what are some of the things that we would give yourself as advice to say, okay, well, here's some things you could have done to avoid some delays, challenges, potholes?
Yeah. So I mentioned the consulting business that we acquired, and I just remember the time that went into relationship building. So we understood where they were coming from, what they wanted from the relationship.
And that would be what you're defining as like before you made an offer on them.
Well, before, during, and after, really, there was real sort of engagement and commitment. And I remember when we bought the sort of B2B and tech business in Unit, Chicago, and Singapore, it was the same sort of thing, really, where we were really careful and considered to understand what it was and how to work together and how to leverage each other's skills. So I think that's such a key learning is taking your time and above and beyond the deal momentum that we referred to. I
It
think
sounds
where
like a
where it ha
curiosity. Is that fair to label it? Like you had a genuine curiosity about the business, about how you could create value rather than just maybe a strategy and like a predefined plan.
curiosity in the relationship, um, rather than sort of a need for a transaction. And I think that's where there's been a couple of M&As that haven't gone brilliantly well, and that is when we have acted in a more transactional way and not taken our time to get close to people and build a relationship. So I think for me that's a big learning. So the momentum matters, solving problems, but equally not allowing that momentum to become the thing. Not it's also about the relationships, and also within that it's about recognizing that there is a time when it's better to actually walk away, because there'll be something that you just discover that you're not sure about, but may, maybe you can't always relationship your way through those things, and that it actually is better to walk away. So there have been things in our M&A journey where overall I would say it's been successful, but there've been one or two moments where I thought, actually probably shouldn't have done that, or probably better off not doing that deal.
When did you transition? So you've evolved and had different roles within the company. You're still in the office taking this call, by the
I
way, just
am,
to point that
I
out.
am, yeah.
So help us understand your journey. Um, and when did you make that transition to chair, and why is the chair still sitting in a chair in the office today?
Yeah, I'm still waiting for the ceiling to be finished. As you can see, it's very trendy, those ceilings, pipes, tinfoil,
Construction
whatever.
zones.
Um, the Yeah, so I was global CEO up until the end of the earnout, and that was 5 years ago. And then at the end of the earnout, I transitioned the CEO role to one of the other co-founders. And then what I did was I took on a role across Chael to help Chael understand how to diversify the client base and also unlock value across all the different geographies. So I did that for a few years. And in parallel to that, I've been the chair of Iris, and the role, like many of the chair roles, is very much about governance, relationships, talent, culture, and all those sorts of things. And obviously, you get to a point where it's hard to sort of untangle yourself because it's part of who you are. It's not a job anymore. It's something else. And I think that's sort of where I'm at. And obviously, it won't last forever, but I've been really excited by our rebrand. There's been a real shift in the sort of energy of the business in the sort of post-COVID era, and a refocus on some of the founding principles about energy and innovation, and cultural creativity. So I've been really excited by that, and also there's some new people that have joined and assumed some of the leadership positions that are really exciting and have got a great opportunity. So I'm really here to stand behind them and help them make this their opportunity.
You didn't complete the earnout and say, good luck, everyone. Besides the, from my perspective, obvious love and passion for what it is that you do, when the financial incentive started to transition as it come to its completion,
Mm.
why did you stick around? And was there a shift in your energy from earnout period to today?
Yeah, I mean it's because I've been involved for 25 years. It's hard to you're part of it. It's part of who you are. I feel like going back to the thing I said earlier on around how important change is to Iris, and the ability to change, and there's always something new happening, whether that's in our own network or within our parent company network. So that's definitely part of it, and it makes it more than just being a sort of monetary relationship. And that's one of the things I'm trying to say about when the M&A works, more than just the money. My example of acquiring the consulting company was they had more money on the table from M&C sites, but they chose us because we were going to be more enjoyable, more of a partner, more, overall and on balance, more rewarding. So there is money, and money is easy to see on a spreadsheet, but M&A is not an exact science, is it? Indeed, it's not really a science at all, although there is money involved. And in the end, it is still about relationships and getting on and people backing people and trust and all those things.
Ian, as we close out here, we're in an AI world. So you also have expanding market technologies that drive innovation and energy within the business. What does that conversation look like in Iris today? What's your perspective on AI in this industry?
Well, I mean, you don't have to work very hard, do you, to hear another perspective on AI? I mean, there's a long way to go with it. I mean, obviously people are worried about it, and it's clearly having an effect. I think it's not a universally distributed opportunity. I think that you've got to decide, are you a magic business or a logic business? If you're a magic business, it's got to be about people and ideas and innovation and doing things that haven't been done yet or haven't been seen before, and using AI tools to help you do it quicker, better, or make the work cheaper or something. If you're a logic business, it's different. If you're in a logic business, it's much more of a threat because there's more linearity. But I think before AI was the thing that was keeping us all awake, there's just so many other waves in the sort of post COVID era, really. And it's crisis on crisis, isn't it? And the cost of living, working working from home. There's quiet quitting, offshoring. There's like so many ththings. Like almost
Turbulence.
every
Yeah, it's
every eight
turbulence.
every let's say 18 months, there's another crisis, and it's so AI is the latest one really. And I mentioned offshoring, but also in housing, and the actual issue is supply and demand. So there's just too many suppliers, too fragmented. Um, there is still, demand, but so supply and demand are not kind of working hand in hand right now. And what clients can do for themselves and what agencies can do for clients, the gap is like nothing now. So because that gap is so small, clients have got more ability to just do things in any which way they like, and that's eroding the margins, and that's also meaning that the agencies feel really vulnerable, and that's why this whole kind of AI debate is causing people so many sleepless nights. And so I think it's obviously a challenge, but I think you've got to decide, are you magic or logic? If it's magic, it's about originality and innovation and using the tools to lean on as a way of being able to, just do it a bit quicker and a bit cheaper.
Brilliant. Ian, thank you for still being present for the industry, both for Iris, but also in these types of resources. It's greatly appreciated. If someone wants to reach out to you and say thank you, how should they do that?
Email is fine, or LinkedIn, but I mean, it's Ian.Millner, Millner at iris-worldwide.com or over LinkedIn.
Wonderful. And I do always want to point this out. Anytime a listener, you hear someone use their agency email address, it's because it's a permanent tattoo on their arm. They may not be there when you listen to this later, but for some reason, everybody emails their agency email because they have no personal email. Ian does not exist in a personal dimension beyond his business. So LinkedIn, use LinkedIn if you reach out to Ian, because when you listen to this, he may not have that email. Do you ever imagine a time you don't have that email?
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, honestly, I'm actually all right about it as well. I know that this is the way, the world works, isn't it? And
Yeah.
that's all. It's all good.
Forward it to his personal Gmail address, Iris. Ian, thank you, my friend.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. I really appreciate it.
If you like this episode, probably like one of our other episodes. Click here.